Hi, delighted to be joined today by John Wallace, a former head of resourcing at RBS, Tesco Bank and Barclays, author of the book Higher Power, and since January 2019 a director of Redford Residential Care, a 30-bed care home in Northern Ireland. You mentioned earlier about testing and the fact that your staff had only been tested last week.
Yeah.
Are there plans then for more regular testing to take place from here on in? Have they given you any indication of that, and where does the responsibility lie in that?
Well, that's a really good question. I have asked that question a lot because the words I use are regular, systematic, and frequent. So as long as there's community evidence of the virus, then that means that the staff are at risk of catching it in the community and bringing it into the home. Now, typically that hasn't been the way, as I say, it's got into homes, but that's a risk that you have to manage nonetheless. And actually, if there's 200,000 tests available per day, which is what we've been told quite a lot, then, my mathematics tells me that, as Northern Ireland accounts for 3% of the UK population, there's 6,000 a day available in Northern Ireland. That's 42,000 a week. For Northern Ireland, that is adequate to test every single member of care staff every single week. So why isn't it being done? And again, I think that goes back to a decision which says we're going to hold these back. Now, no one has explained this to me, but just in case for NHS staff who show symptoms. Now, again, you need to test NHS staff who show symptoms. I mean, that's absolutely understandable.
Yeah.
But we were literally told when we got the testing packs in, there are no plans to do any further testing. Again, now the cynic would say that so the health minister can stand up and say, we have now tested every single care staff and care home resident in Northern Ireland, and presumably the same in Scotland, presumably the same in England. And that's a big tick. And then we move on to the next news cycle. But one test doesn't matter. I could have told you that no one in the home had coronavirus. But now we've tested and we can prove that. But what I want to be able to say is I want to be able to say that every week from here on in, next week, the week after, and the week after, and the week after, until we can say, right, here's a vaccination. And then obviously, well, the first people to get vaccinated are care home staff and care home residents. But we'll see. Because that's when it ends. That's when it ends for us, is when there's a vaccine.
So how do you, I guess, as a business owner, how do you prepare for the new normal, particularly in an environment that is just so vulnerable?
Yeah, I mean that's really difficult. So basically, there is no new of anything for us, right? What we've been doing for the last 3 months, we will continue to do until there is a vaccine and people are vaccinated and safe, because we just can't operate any other way. We'll continue with the multiple cleaning shifts. We'll continue with the additional management. We'll continue with the activities, and we will continue to not allow relatives to come and visit. Now, fortunately, we're over the summer now, and one of the things that we'll go back and we'll seek guidance from the Department of Health and we'll seek guidance from the regulator is back to my point about we're not just in the business of keeping people alive. Now, when the weather gets good, we're going to try and figure out a way of doing visiting in the gardens and things like that. We just, as part of the extension, we put in new garden areas and it's quite nice and stuff like that. And people can meet there. We've got to think about how do we get visitors back in, get relatives back in a way that isn't this nonsense of talking through windows and stuff like that. It can be a bit more human. So that's going to be our challenge. But new normal, it's not a thing for us. We've got to, I think last week was the first week I actually felt comfortable in 3 months, and that's just because the figures in Northern Ireland were in a really good place.
Yeah.
Very, very few deaths, occasionally one a day. But actually the key figure is what's the input, and the input is the number of new cases identified. And literally yesterday there was one new case identified in Northern Ireland. When you're at that kind of level, you can feel comfortable, but you just can't relax your guard. We just got to keep doing the same stuff. So.
And I guess to finish off, John, I mean, when you're thinking about this, what learnings do you hope emerge from it? And what, if anything, gives you, I guess, cause for optimism for the future?
Well, I think the learning is that when you have an illness that predominantly impacts the over 80s, stop and think, where do over 80s hang out, and then do something to protect that. If I were to talk on a national scale, I think the notion that PPE is a competitive international market clearly doesn't work in a global pandemic. I mean, there'll be a lot of people will have made an awful lot of money in this, but my brother-in-law, for example, got COVID-19 because he was a doctor and he was working on a COVID ward and they didn't have the right PPE, so he got COVID-19 and took it home to my sister who got COVID-19. Blah blah blah. Yeah. So the idea that PPE is a competitive international market, it feels like something that we should make sure that we have on a local level. The idea of having been able to ramp up testing really quickly. Testing is you look at the countries that have done well in inverted commas out of this, they're the ones who've had testing programs really right from the get-go. Germany's been really strong in that. South Korea's been really strong in that. So they've managed to get their testing in place pretty soon. So there is, think about who the illness impacts. Look to protect them, get your testing right, get your PPE right. And that should, because this is going to happen again. It's not, people say this is unprecedented. There's nothing unprecedented about a pandemic. Throughout human history, we get them all the time. You just think the unprecedented thing is this one's happened on Twitter as well. But you just think we'd be a little bit more savvy about what needs to be done to restrict this. And of course, the death toll is nowhere near the Spanish flu, for example, but it's still horrific. And then you look at countries like Brazil, the United States. They're not, what was it? I think so. One US journalist described it as they're in the second innings of a 9-innings baseball match at the minute. So they've got a long way to go.
Mm-hmm. And again, any cause for optimism?
It's okay at the minute. Yeah. I think optimism's quite. I'm desperately disheartened by how we've dealt with it in this country. Desperately disheartened by that. I mean, I think it's been embarrassing, actually. I think in a business sense, right? So move away from the pandemic. Optimism in business sense, absolutely. I think the one thing that this depression, recession, or downturn has given us is we know where the bottom is. Generally, what happens in downturns is you don't know where the bottom is. Like in the financial crash, 2007, 2008, we didn't know when it was going to bottom out. So therefore, they talked about the green shoots of recovery. When are the green shoots of recovery? Is this the green shoots of recovery? We've hit the bottom. We know we've hit the bottom because the economy absolutely shut down. So then that means that the climb out of it should be a fairly consistent sort of pathway. Yeah. And I think we should see a return to confidence. And when I speak to a lot of people, what they talk about is backed up order books. There's a lot of people wanting to get moving. Now, hopefully for your sector in recruitment, from my old business in recruitment, you would like to think that will be ramped up pretty quickly. I think the government's response with furloughing people and the assistance they gave to small business, I know literally saved some small businesses and has saved a number of jobs. So, as long as we can get that switched on quite quickly, stop mass gatherings, keep the social distancing guidelines, but let's get the country up and running again. Because quite frankly, this is not a decision about do we save lives or do we have the economy. People forget it's the economy pays for the NHS. And we need that driving again. And it's terrible for people. I mean, there's very few people have gone through this and actually enjoyed the experience. So we do need to get back to some kind of business normality. But my optimism is I do think there will be a recovery. I think it'll be pretty sharp. And I think in a couple of years' time we'll be okay.
Good. Well, look, John, the very best of luck with everything. And I really appreciate your time today. So thanks very much.
No, good to talk, Mark. Thank you very much. Good chatting to you. It's always nice to rant to someone different.
All the best.
All right. Take care, buddy. Bye.